Welcome to the Furlo Capital Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into the intricacies of passive real estate investing. And our mission is to equip people to invest wisely in both property and residence so that together we can build wealth while improving housing. I'm James, and this is my wife, Jessie.
Hey, so I was we were tucking in our kids, and I was asking him, I asked Samson tonight, he was like, why did you have to do such a quick tuck-in? I was like, oh, we're just, Dad and I are working on the podcast, want to get it done. He goes, oh, yeah. I was like, what do you think the podcast is about? Like, what do you think we do? He was like, well, I don't know. So I said something funny. I was like, do you think we do that? He was like, no. I was like, what do you think I say on the podcast? He goes, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was like, that is pretty much what I say on the podcast.
Oh, man.
I was just like, well, I say other brilliant things. Like, sometimes I ask questions.
It's funny. I don't really,
so funny.
I haven't really thought about it, but it will be it's kind of cool to think that there's a realm of possibility where, I don't know, 20 years from now, that they're like, oh yeah, I would love to see what my parents did and talked about. And
it's kind of a strange thought.
And they have video of it all.
Right.
Like, it's not just photos or text stuff. I think about that with my blog as well. Like, someday they'll read this.
Yeah, they'll read
Maybe.
it.
Probably not, but
I don't know.
It's all good. It's all good. Well, Samson, Eleanor, today we are talking about this article that I read in the Harvard Business Review.
Oh.
I always, exactly. I always feel really highfalutin whenever I say that.
Nice.
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I read the Harvard Business Review.
Yeah, that's right. It's, I like to say, it's one of only 2 subscriptions that I have. The other, which is to Superman comics. So I feel like
you balance.
I balance it out. Exactly. I have very specific tastes. But anyways,
that's all right.
This one caught my eye because it's written by a guy named Ed Freeman, and the title of it is "The Market Alone Can't Fix the U.S. Housing Crisis."
Interesting.
Yes. So, spoiler, he's going to go big time on government's got to get way big time involved in helping out.
All right.
But I thought he brings up some really good points and some issues and just talks about how complicated this is. And he specifically attacks investors and landlords. And
all right.
So
here we go.
It's worth talking about as an investor and as a landlord. And just things like, how do we keep this in mind? And in some ways, not be the person who he's railing against. So one of the things he talks about is that there are tens of millions of households that spend more than 30% of their income on housing, which I thought was interesting. I know for our screening policy, we do essentially 33%. We say that the rent cannot be any more than 3 times their income. That's how we word it, which comes out to...
their income has to be 3 times the rent.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
I was like, hopefully your rent's not bigger than your income.
Which comes out to about 33%. So I'm kind of like, what he talks about here is we're right on the bubble. I have a hunch that percentage is more like 40 to 50%, which is why he's saying that.
Yeah.
But he's he's like 30% is kind of the magic marker, and there's a lot of people who are over it right now. He does say that that shelter is a basic human need, and so therefore the fact that we have some that's unaffordable should be a national scandal. I would probably quibble with the bar that he has set. He's definitely in the we should have housing is affordable for everybody at all time. Again, in the same way, he would probably say in the same breath, in the same way that clean water is available and clean air is available. I think he's putting us on the same level. And for me, my question would be let's talk about what equals good housing. I think you oftentimes
that was exactly where my head went, and it was unfortunately, housing costs money, and so you can't just say everyone should have housing needs met, because the quality of the housing is variable, and so what someone can afford, what one person can afford, another maybe cannot, and what someone's standard of quality housing is maybe is totally different than what the next person's is.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting.
That's complicated.
But I do fundamentally agree. There is this imbalance, and there's ways to there's issues with it.
Interesting.
He goes on in this 12 pages that I've got here. I won't read the entire thing, but he goes on to kind of outline what some of the problem is. Mm-hmm. And he says that like one of the things that people have tried to say is like, hey, we just got to fix zoning laws, and we'll get into that and why that doesn't help necessarily. But like that's one of them. But ultimately he goes, one of the biggest cause is the market power of developers and landlords. And he goes, they have all this power and they take advantage of people.
So what would be an example of them?
So, and we talked about this a bunch of weeks back, but there's the property management software company, RealPage, that is currently being sued, to which I'm kind of like, he really anchors himself on the RealPage thing that they've done, and we'll get into what it is in a little bit. But I'm also like, the system's working. Yeah, they did something bad, then the system's correcting. Like, I don't, like, what's the problem here?
Yeah, they weren't just let loose to do whatever they wanted.
But he gets into it. So essentially, what RealPage did was they prioritized higher rents and accepted lower vacancy rates. So RealPage, property management software, and he gets into the numbers here. But essentially, he goes, they got a whole bunch of landlords enrolled into their system, so they got all the information. And essentially, it was as if there was just one big property management company setting the rates across an entire city. In some cases, like 90% of them. And so he goes, they could just raise everybody's rates and just go, yep, we're going to be okay with a higher vacancy rate. We don't care, because eventually everyone's got to live somewhere. And he goes into the numbers. It was a little weird. He's like, yeah, on average, they made $53 more per unit per month. It's like, what percentage is that? You know, in DC, that's not a huge number. But, so, you know, there's some of that stuff where I'm like, okay, there's there. So that was a huge one. And the other one, we already talked about the permissive zoning rules. He goes, they just don't help. And they don't confront the power of landlords that they have. Like, that's his, like, landlords are a problem. Like, that's his main like thrust. Like, oh man. And
it's just because they are controlling what housing is available and how much it costs.
Correct.
That's his argument.
Yeah, he says exactly here. Landlords have the ability to raise prices above so-called competitive levels and hold back the supply of housing. And then he cites the RealPage. And so in some cases, they say they control as many as 19.7 million rental units out of 22 million desirable and investment-grade apartment units.
That's a large percentage.
Large percentage, exactly. The example he gave was in some places it's 60%, and in other places it's 90% of the broader market. They've got their software. And so I thought this was super interesting. So traditionally, what's a goal as a property manager? Like, is it to get the absolute highest rent you can get, or is it to make sure you have as close to 100% occupancy as you can get?
Depends on the landlord.
No, like you.
Oh, me as a landlord?
Yeah. What's more important to you?
What's more important to me is to keep it filled with a responsible tenant.
Right. So that's more on the 100% occupancy side.
Yeah.
What RealPage decided was that should not be the senior metric. That's not the goal anymore.
The priority is
he goes, we are okay with having a 90% occupancy rate because we're pushing the rents. And they go, and we can do that for a majority of the places. And so people just don't have a choice. They eventually have to go to one of them. And here's the part where I'm like, yeah, they definitely got themselves into trouble, is RealPage terminated its relationship with landlords that rejected its recommended rents more than a fraction of the time. And so I'm like, yeah, that's where, like, to me, like, yeah, that's the problem right there. They say, if you're not going to play our game, you can't play.
Right.
And they did a good job of it. Like I said, they were able to raise their rents by 53%. And then I did some interesting math. He was like talking about Phoenix and Sacramento and how their rent hikes were especially pronounced, raising rents 76 and 86%. There's like from 2016 to 2023. Oh, okay. Like that sounds astronomical, but I mean, it's not like,
yeah, over a,
it's a lot, but I'm also like, oh,
period.
it's a while, but whatever.
What's the average rent increase over, like, year over year?
Well, in Oregon, it's over 10%.
Right. So
Which
I'm kinda like,
he gets into some of this, and we'll talk about some of these other issues where he talks about rent controls. I'm like, you actually get the same effect as you do with RealPage, because essentially the government says, here's what you can raise the rents at.
right.
So I guess what everybody does.
That's what people do.
So he has a solution to that as well, though. So here's his conclusion, though, based off of like going deep on the RealPage thing. He goes, left to their own devices, profit-motivated landlords will not provide the quantity of housing needed to meet the supply shortage. Rather, they will undertake the profit-maximizing strategy of colluding with each other to raise rents and hold back supply. So I was like, I guess in some ways that's a fair statement, because when landlords had the option to use that software, they did. I guess. It's very mean, though. He obviously does not like landlords. And this is part of his, like, this is the problem. Landlords, with the help of the software, which eventually will go away because they're getting sued and it will all stop. Yeah. But landlords are not in it to help society. They're in it to help themselves. And fundamentally, shelter is a human right. And so landlords / whoever's in control should value helping out the community more than making money.
I just kind of feel like he's getting his
think water
correlation and causation kind of mixed up a little bit here. And it's like, is the landlord the problem, or is it this software management that's the problem? And I get that there's a mix of both.
The software's definitely a problem, but it's the landlords who willingly adopted it.
Well, yes, but not 100% of the landlords. I mean, even in that example that you gave, like RealPage kicked landlords off or said, okay, we're not going to partner with you if they rejected their rent increases. So if a landlord was like, hey, I don't really think that I want to raise rents, like that's not my priority, RealPage was like, okay, then don't work with us. So that is the problem.
I think too, like
that's one of the problems.
It's funny, like he talks about how there's high switching costs, right? It's not just easy for a tenant to pick up and move somewhere else. Like the same as there is true for software for the landlords.
Sure.
It is not easy to like, I'm just going to switch to a new piece of software. Oh my gosh. I did that once. I switched to one. I did my due diligence, and then they changed some stuff in the software. It messed stuff up, and I was like, no, I can't do this anymore.
Yep.
And so I switched, and I did it like 9 months later, and oh my gosh, all my tenants were like, what are you doing? Just pick something. I'm like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sticking to this one for reals.
Payment methods, different tracking methods.
It was, So he doesn't fully appreciate that part of it as well. You know, RealPage had other benefits that they wanted, and they were making more money, and they had a really compelling offer.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I also am like, there's so many landlords that are just like, they're mom and pop shops out there.
Right.
Like, oh, cool, I'll make more money. It sounds great. They probably helped them set it up, and like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that they were probably doing to help out. And so he does go on to say, so that's like,
I mean,
landlords have control, and they act monopolistic, and they're how did he say? He doesn't say the word greedy, but it's heavily implied. They are profit maximizing.
Well, and I think that you got to zoom out, because the bigger problem that he has is that he believes housing shouldn't be a business. He believes housing
100%
should be just given.
Again,
it's just a
water.
necessity.
That's his water, electricity. It should be like a utility. What does it cost to deliver it?
That is what it should be.
And some of his solutions get to that. Yeah, that's a fundamental, and I think that right there, and you just said it really succinctly, is the fundamental divide.
Yeah.
Do you believe this is a right and should be provided at cost, and at like whatever minimum you can, as long as you're hitting the bar of acceptable quality. Again, think water, think electricity.
Which that's another debatable.
He goes, and versus someone who says, no, like it's private sector, it's okay. And people are trying to figure out solutions to all that. I mean, it's like, in some ways, it's very similar. I always think about this with the self-driving car debate, where it's like, had self-driving cars been invented today, our roads would not exist the way they are at all. And so instead, they're trying to get the self-driving cars to drive on roads that are not designed for self-driving cars, and really and it's a super hard problem to solve.
Right.
Like, again, if cars were invented today, we would just have essentially they'd look like train tracks. It'd be super easy. It'd be all solved. But we can't do that. And so this is the same sort of thing, these solutions he's going to come up with. He's like, so we have the system where everything's kind of, it's whatever you want. So can we try to add some structure and stuff here? And it's like, and it's super messy. And it's like, man, I don't know if you're ever going to get there.
Right.
So what he talks about is what the private sector can and can't do. So there's a new acronym. Have you heard of NIMBY, Not in My Backyard?
No.
that was really popular with like power plants back in the day. That like they didn't want to put them in like neighborhoods or whatever, or different types of schools or prisons, and people would be like, "Not in my backyard, NIMBY." Well, now it's a YIMBY, yes, in my backyard.
Oh my word!
And I know. And so he says that there are people who say that zoning rules are a primary, if not the primary, cause of the present housing crisis. And essentially, it's saying they prevent the construction of duplexes, triplex, other more dense housing. Right? And he's like, and it's, I guess there's a slogan. It's called "Legalize Housing," is what they're calling it,
so
to try
he
to
wants
enable
more multi-units.
Well, he's saying this is what some people say. This is 100%. But he's saying that people claim that the problem why we have a housing crisis is because you can't build more multi-units everywhere.
How does that make any sense if he thinks that landlords who are owning these multi-units are the problem? Like, he just thinks each individual is going to create a multi-unit for themselves, and then they're going to live in it and not rent out the other unit to somebody else?
No, he's making the argument that this doesn't solve the problem. See, we're still in the problem. Like, you think this is a solution, and it's not, is what he's saying. He actually goes at it from a very different angle, but I like your thinking there. I think it's interesting. He goes, look, we need relaxed zoning rules. He goes, it's necessary, but not sufficient. And he goes, they've done some studies, and what they found is that it results in like a 0.8 increase in housing supply. He's like,
not a ton.
It's not nothing, but it's not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
I thought this was super interesting, though, his argument for it, which I was like, okay, I buy this. When you make more flexible zoning, it suddenly makes the land more valuable. Yeah. Right?
Because you have more options.
Yes. And he goes, so what happens is, this is so fascinating. He goes, when whoever owned that home, that land that used to be for a single family home is now zoned multifamily, he goes, they're not dumb. They get it. And so they charge more for it now when they want to sell it. So any opportunities in there to go buy a cheaper place, to have that land and then build a multifamily, he goes, it's all built in. It's like, so it never solves the affordable housing side of the equation. And I was like, that's super interesting. Yeah, so it says, in many places, expectations of inadequate profits, not zoning, appear to be the primary constraint on further housing construction. Which I'm like, yeah, 100%. That's why I don't take on a project. I don't go like, man, the zoning is kind of unfavorable. I'm like, no, I can't make money off of this. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And so I'm like, yeah, he's 100% true. And he makes this other observation, which I have totally seen as well, is that what happens is when they build luxury units and focus their efforts on the affluent. Because the marginal cost of building a really nice place is not that much, right? No matter what, you got to have a foundation, you got to have the walls. And if you add 200 square feet to a place, it's actually relatively cheap because it's mostly air. And then you just put in better finishes. And he goes, and you can charge significantly more. And so the problem is that the people selling the land, they know all this. And so they price it in such a way where the only option the builder has, really, if they're going to make money, is to build a luxury place. Which, again, his argument would be then we need to get rid of the I want to make money part of the equation.
Right. Yeah, the priority would have to become...
Hang on for it.
The priority would have to become making housing available.
Yeah. He then...
Not making money.
And I think this is one of the other tensions that he has, is he says, look, higher land values are good for current landowners or homeowners, whatever, but they're not good for tenants or people who want to buy.
Yeah.
And so you still have this tension, yeah, we do want homes to go up, but,
not too much.
Within reason. Yeah. And it's one of those cats already out of the bag,
Right.
If housing prices have gone up dramatically, no one really wants those to fall. So it's hard. Let's see here. And I think one of the things that happened in the zoning piece was people forget that markets are dynamic. Oftentimes, I think this happens a lot. Lawmakers make a rule, and they go, things will stay the same. They're assuming it's all static, and so we forced them down this path. And go, nope, it's not. People react. And it's like, who would have seen, outside of in retrospect, where it's like, oh yeah, I guess this land is more valuable. Yeah, you're gonna price it higher. Of course. That wasn't like they were assuming a static market. Prices would stay the same. It would just be more options, and now more developers would want in. One of those,
Which you would think, like, there would be market analysts and psychologists or something working together to figure this out. But
maybe
Nope.
It's one of those weird. That's hard to like intellectually think through. It really requires
like case studies.
Just a bunch of people all doing their own self-interest thing. Let the community do its thing. Where you go, what do they call it? It's wisdom of the crowds kind of thing. Where it's the crowd is the one who goes, nah, all right, here's what we'll do. And it's one guy kind of has an idea, and you just and eventually go, oh, okay, this is the game. It's super hard to figure out. So then he goes, so that's the problem with like, let's relax the zoning rules, which is more of a, we'll let the private market figure it out. He goes, it just doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
So he's like, let's go the public route. How can we solve this? Which is his ultimate argument. The first thing that he wants to see happen is stronger public governance. So enforce antitrust laws and real estate entries. And he goes, like RealPage. Like, yeah, okay, I get it. Which again, I'm like, the system's working. Like,
yeah, that's what they're doing.
They broke the rule. They're following it. He then goes on to say, like, I don't know. He's trying to say, like, it's not good enough. You need to do more. Because one of his things, he goes, now landlords have all learned. Like, they've seen what RealPage did and went, oh, okay, I'll just keep my rent a little bit higher, accept the lower vacancy rate. I actually make more money in the long run. Mm-hmm. I go, so bummer, so even suing them and not letting them do it, like that, the strategy has now changed. I was like, yeah, I guess. But that's his first one. Get after those illegal stuff. That's the only one that he mentions, though. So there's that. Outside of, he does say that there's some like neighborhood CC&Rs and HOAs that will create rules that effectively are zoning rules. That he's like, we need to get rid of those.
Interesting.
He then says rent stabilization laws are really important. Rent caps, which we in Oregon, he describes what we have here in Oregon. You got to prevent them from raising rents more than the rate of overall inflation. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of those, like, so we are inflation +7, capped at 10, and he would say get rid of the +7 and maybe cap it at 5. That's which I think in New York, I think that's what it is.
Which effectively would just make your business grow really slowly.
No, it would make your real growth 0. If all you can ever do is raise rents by inflation, you're always just playing catch up. And then the only game that you're going to try to play is that there's a gap between your revenue and your expenses. And
so
if they both grow at the same percentage, in theory, the expenses are a lower number. So you get like a little bit extra growth in there from a profit standpoint. But it's
not a really good business structure.
No, it's not. It's not. The only strategy for that kind of thing is to do what we're doing today, which are you do flips, you do quick turnarounds, you do a syndication where you're doing a value add, and then once you're done, you sell it to someone else who's not looking for that profit growth. I mean, that's becomes your only full-time type of option, unless you've already just hit an income level where you're like, whatever, I don't care. It makes it no longer as advantageous as a buy and hold, which he goes, great. I don't want you to buy and hold it. I want you to sell it. I want it to be a public good. I want it to be at cost. So he's like, yeah, that's what I want. He wants to destroy the type of business that we have. Again, outside of like doing the quick turn stuff. Yeah.
I wonder, does he say anything in there about like nonprofit organizations that provide housing or provide subsidized housing?
Hey, Tyler talks a little bit about that in a little bit.
Because it's kind of like Yeah. It's kind of, that would be interesting to me because it's like, all right, real estate is a business. Like, it just is. You can't say that it's not. Yeah. Today it is.
Well, you could turn anything from a business to not a business.
You could.
And vice versa. I mean, that's what they did in the airline industry. It used to be all heavily regulated, and then they deregulated the entire thing. It was very messy.
Now it's just private airlines competing with one
another. So that was an example where it went the other way. And again, he's making the argument for...
that's what should happen.
And look, there's pluses and minuses to everything.
Sure.
Right? Like, yeah, having it heavily regulated, having it be essentially treated like a utility... There are nice parts about that, but, in the sense that, yeah, for the most part, costs are controlled. But, I don't know, like, do we all love the way our water system works? And or electricity,
Well,
it's kind of functional, but also not. And there's really nothing you can do about it. You can't just be like, I'm out, I'm moving. Like, that's not a thing.
Well, here's the interesting thing, though. I was thinking about this a little bit earlier because it's like, yes, we do. There are basic services that we get. We can get city water. We can be on the water. We pay for the utility. But if we had the means and wanted, like, which it's good enough, you know, for most people. If you had the means and you wanted to get purified water at a purification system, you could. And you could have it better, quote unquote. And so, or you could add solar panels. Right? Or
water is a commodity. It is the same for everybody. And housing would eventually become that.
Right.
It would just become the same for everybody. And it would be very boring. And which maybe that's okay.
Well, but wouldn't it still exist for certain people who wanted luxury homes to add on or increase or get better?
Probably not over time.
Really?
No, I don't think. I mean,
because there's plenty of people who buy bottled water or do
there would
whatever.
Be a transition period. Yeah, but like that's a fraction of people.
It's probably more than you think.
I doubt it.
Huh.
Versus just getting water out of the tap. Oh my gosh, if you were to count number of gallons, it's not even close.
Yeah, that's true.
Because even people who buy bottled water, like they're still using shower for shower water, for dishes, for laundry. Like
more than likely. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so much. So it would all become a commodity is what would happen. And again, he might be like, cool, whatever. Now we have to get into, well, how do we define what that commodity is in the same way that they have water testing, like this water is deemed good to eat or drink.
How do you say it's good enough?
Yeah.
Which I mean, HUD has certain standards.
There's a whole transition process. And that's my whole thing of like with the self-driving cars, right? It's like, how do you fit it into this existing system where houses are all different and individual?
Yeah.
You know, if you were to start over today, you'd be like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
Here are these squares.
There would be a baseline.
Enjoy,
sure.
But we don't have that. And so now who do you get to choose who lives where? It's like, it's so messy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very messy. Yeah, so he then goes on to talk about some public planning stuff. Oh, he actually talks about like water. Oh, no, he's talking about water and sewage, how if you're building willy-nilly, it could be an issue. He says effective planning requires that decisions be made jointly at the regional, city, and community levels. A system of layered co-governance. I heard that and went, that sounds so miserable. Could you imagine? Like, okay.
Sounds like a lot of red tape.
So we're looking at a property and we just want to split the lot because there's currently 2 houses on there.
Yeah.
And we just want to cut it down the middle, whatever.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if it was like, so I called the city. I was like, hey, I just want to see if I can do this. They're like, yep, no problem. Here's the process. Here's what you go through to do it. It looks like it could qualify. Like, awesome. They did say there's a question about the well that's on there. You should call the county to find out. Called the county and they're like, you can do whatever. We don't care. I was like, awesome. Love the answer. What he's saying is then I would then talk to like the community level. There'd be like a state level. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Oh my
you
gosh.
Had 2 other groups here.
We all got to get aligned on this.
Now have to have a say in this.
Layered co-governance. That just sounds so miserable to get stuff done in.
I mean,
I get his point where once you could all agree, if you could all agree, yes, it would probably be optimized. But I have a hunch, like, if you think the permit process is slow now, oh man.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
It would be miserable. But I get what he's saying. He also goes like, and as we do some more zoning reforms, we need to do it in such a way where we don't create easy profit opportunities for spectators. Like, okay, how are you going to do that? He doesn't say. He's just like, we just need to do that. Like, cool. Good luck.
Like you're saying, in a capitalist nation, that we currently exist in, that's it's anti what most people function.
I have a hunch that he does not like the capitalist system and would be okay if we did away with that.
Right.
But
if you're talking about public goods, that's not capitalist.
Yeah, he even goes as far as to say like, so our coasts, right? Our big cities, a lot of people live there. And he goes, and you might think that that's just because, well, that's where, how does he say it? It's simply they're productive cities. And so they've just got the lion's share of the labor and there's good weather and like things like that. Mm-hmm. People just want to move there. And it's like, no. Again, this is his perspective. He goes, it's more monopoly power where it's the largest firms and the powerful people are all there and they're forcing everyone to say, you have to come into the office, you have to live nearby. He's like, and there's things like Silicon Valley where they had defense contracts and publicly funded university research that helped them become big and lock in this monopoly. So he's even like the big coast cities, he goes, is also a direct result of big corporations forcing people to live near them. It's like, yeah, that was kind of my like.
It's a little conspiracy theory-esque.
I mean, I guess
there's some of that happening.
It came across as like
sure,
he's just very angry with.
Wow.
I don't know. It's one of those where like maybe he's a renter and he had his rent increased on him recently. He's just super angry about it. And I don't know. It's kind of
I don't know.
like, man, what happened to you, dude? He's got a kid where that's what's happening to him. I don't know. So he then gets into social housing. And this is more what you were talking about, where he says the public sector should build and operate housing. Now he does say that it happened, and because of some things that didn't go well, it didn't end well. And he's like, so it's been stigmatized. And then he kind of goes, but it can work well. And he cites some places like Singapore and Vienna, and then Montgomery County and Maryland. But I was like, I've been to Singapore. It's a city-state. The entire state is a city.
Yeah.
And B, it's run by a benevolent dictator. I'm like, I don't know if that's an apples to apples. Which again, I think further leads to my like, I think he wants to like, if he could get rid of the capitalist side of real estate altogether, I think he would. He wants it to be like Singapore, where it's like, honestly, a dictator owns everything. And he's like, yeah, you guys can live there. You're welcome. Like, that's what he wants. And I'm like, huh. All right. And he goes, one of the things it could do is it could supply decent housing. Again, that word decent is very fluffy in my opinion, but it could provide decent housing for poor and working class households. And I thought this was a fascinating kind of thought as well. It would impose competitive discipline on private rivals. So if I'm building a place and I know that there's a big housing development that's going in that's going to be affordable, I'm going to not just try to build the best of the best. I would try to build more affordable as well. It's kind of a theory. I'm like, wouldn't it just make it 100%? Private would be luxury.
Yeah,
and
I feel like it would just split.
Public can take care of that.
Yep.
Be just a new form of a split. But
right, because if the developer was still in it as a business, they would want to maximize their revenue. So,
but that would be his like. He's like, don't worry about it. We can just learn from the lessons we had in the past. Let's copy some of these other places. And
does he talk about any of the issues that went down?
Yeah, I mean a little bit. He says there's some racial stuff in here as well. He goes, due to a combination of federal and local policy, white flight, and deindustrialization, some of this housing became shelter of last resort for many poor black families. And a bunch of them got destroyed as a result. And but he's also like, but it's distorted and it's not real. Like, it's not incomplete history. And I've heard some of that. I'm like, I think it's one of those where it's like, these are massively complex projects. So it turns out everything that went on was massively complex, and everything's like, well, it depends. It was a little complicated.
Right.
And when people try to simplify it down into a single
issue,
try to wrap your head around it, and you go, it's incomplete. I know. Because you can't capture it all.
Well, and really, I mean, what that touches on and what we've experienced in having units working with residents, it is a multi-layered process to work with human beings. It's like, it's not just, this is a human being, they deserve a house. It's like, well, are they going to take care of the house? Are they going to, like, what are they going to do in that house? Who's going to pay if things get broken or used or broken or,
and it's like, it's very rare you get a simple situation where it's like a tenant just goes, I don't feel like paying my rent. Like, it's way more complicated than that. And I think it's the same thing on the other side. If a landlord's like, I'm not going to fix it, it's not just, I want to maximize my profits.
Right.
In some cases, in a lot of cases, they actually did pay too much for the property.
Right.
And now they don't have the money to actually do the repairs. And like, I just can't fix it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. They're over leveraged and.
Yeah. And that becomes a problem. And that happens a lot, which I don't know. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's super hard. So I thought that was just an interesting article.
It is interesting.
On his, like, to me, some of the more thought-provoking things were like, okay, we've talked about the zoning stuff. He's like, it's not the panacea that you think. And for me, it was particularly eye-opening to be like, I could see how prices would adjust on people real quick because the land is now more valuable.
Yep.
I thought like he talks about the rent caps and making it harder to evict tenants, to which I'm like, yes, let the rest of the country catch up to Oregon because it would make Oregon more valuable. Because right now, Oregon, investors don't like being in Oregon because of that rule. But if it was across the nation, dude, Oregon would like explode all of a sudden because people are like, oh, why not? And so I'm like, yes, like, well, please do it. That'd be so amazing. Oh, that would be great since we're already there. Oh my word, that'd be so. I don't think it'll ever happen. And then I think the other just intriguing piece behind it for me was just that, like, at least thinking about what could those public projects potentially look like. Is there a way to do it that is successful? And my guess is, this is one of those hard things where it's like, my guess is you can't actually do the massive projects. It's got to be a whole bunch of little projects, which are really hard because you want to do the ones where you're like, we're going to add 3 million houses this next year. Like, yeah, I think the answer is like, you're going to add 300 million every single year for the next 50 years. Yeah. Like, that's the answer. That's a sustainable thing that you can do in such a way that it works.
Well, and like you're saying, it's a dynamic system. So as you're doing that in smaller chunks, it's going to change and mold and shift, and you'll learn, hopefully, where to improve and what to let go, which it's just hard.
Well, it's hard, too, because you're not going to have necessarily government contractors. They're going to hire private contractors to do it who will have the pricing. Yeah. It's so complicated.
It's complicated.
Yeah. And I think it's fundamentally, well, the question that needs to be wrestled with is housing a fundamental right? And should it be treated more like a utility where we give it away as much as we can at cost and the same for everybody? Because that's the best way to do it at cost. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, obviously the way that I behave and live my life, I'm like, I don't want that to happen.
Right.
But I'm also like, you know, if this disappeared tomorrow, like there's other opportunities in the world, other places for me to add value. That's okay. I'll survive. Yeah. But it's an intriguing, like, how do you just balance out some of those things? Yeah. And I guess maybe a good thought exercise would be, if you were to start over today, like we wipe all the houses off the map and you get to kind of get into God mode and start over. What would that look like? How would you structure it in such a way? I think there's something to be said about the beauty and creativity behind all the different housing and housing types, and people have different housing situations. Yeah. The house for us right now is awesome. We love it. We've got friends who'd be like, oh my gosh, that would be horrible. I'm in a neighborhood. Yeah. You know, single story only. It's only 1,200 square feet. Like, you know, they would struggle.
Different, so housing needs are different.
You and I, like, if we were given a 2,500 square foot home, we'd be like, I don't know what to do with all this. I'm sure we figured it out. But like, we think about, like, how hard would that be to clean? You know, like, that's where our head goes. So
our poor little dog.
There's something to be said.
Too many stairs.
I know, right? And so I just think that, like, it's good to have the variability. And maybe there is some weird middle ground there. And I don't know if I ever find it. But
well, I think there's another huge issue here that we haven't even touched on, which is, like, maybe this is another podcast.
Let's do it.
But it's the idea that there are other needs besides just housing.
Yeah.
That's like, okay, for someone to be able to get to a place where they can function and live in a home like take care of that home at a basic level is like, okay, we're talking now about like mental health or drug issues or like, you know, there's different issues that affect housing.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of that same issue when they talk about people winning the lottery. They're not ready for it, and they just don't handle it well, and they actually are in a worse spot when they started. Could there potentially be the same thing if you're like just to make housing public and just give it to people?
Right. It's kind of like, I don't know. You know, and we've kind of had different thoughts about, like, you know, there's ideas of like halfway houses or like community living where you're learning together and there's accountability, and it's more than just we're giving you a place to live. Yeah. But I don't know.
What if there's something so I'm on the board of a nonprofit here called Love Inc. And they come alongside people, right? They don't just do handouts like, man, we want to be with you. We want to walk with you. And like, for example, some of the things they do is they do classes with people. And what they do for their clients is they have incentives. So if you show up to the classes, you also get some handouty types of things. And in some cases, like, yeah, we're going to help you pay for this thing. You pay 50%, we'll pay the other 50%. But there are like there's things that they have to do. They have to, the person needs to be just as involved.
Yeah.
And if they're not, like, they don't give it to them. They go, man, let's talk about this. Let's see where we're at. And so I wonder if there's a broader model for that. Because like what you said there, like, if someone isn't able to afford a house, you're making the assumption, observation, whatever, that, well, there's other reasons why they can't afford a place. And he goes, yeah, because evil landlords are jacking up prices. That's his...
In some cases.
And he goes,
not in all cases.
The person who can't afford is the victim.
Yeah.
They're the problem. Like, they're not the problem. The problem is the landlord. So he's coming up with ways like, how do we knock the landlords down? And your head is more like, how do we raise these people up?
Yeah.
And which, again, are just two fundamental ways, two fundamentally different ways of seeing things.
And it's probably a combination of the two.
The answer's somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's the other.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little bit of both.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is what makes this so complicated and why there isn't a...
People are complicated.
Yeah. I do appreciate his, just the irony of him talking about how, like, they try these simplistic solutions and he's like, here's my 3 things. I think the same rule applies, man. It's a whole bunch of things. It's not going to be this or that. But I think it's interesting, and I think it's important for us as investors to think about and not just ignore, and to say maybe on a micro level, how do we do our part to make sure we're not just seeking profit maximization, but we are also improving communities, and part of that is figuring out how to make housing affordable for folks. And I think that's a tension that is worth wrestling with. And I think, like, these are things that I think about in my business and how I'm investing. And yeah, in some cases I do forego the profit piece. I got some tenants, I let them stay, even though they're not paying their rent consistently. And I work with them, and some months it's very painful to do it. And I'm okay with that. Yeah. Saying, yeah, I would probably make a lot more money if I just kicked them out right away and then moved on. I don't even charge them a late fee because I'm like, dude, they're struggling to pay their rent. Like, why in the world would I like?
Yeah. Why make the number bigger?
And so there's like, but I could.
Yeah.
But that's a choice that I made to say, yeah, no, I think as long as they have a place to live, and this may not last forever, and it probably won't, because eventually it will become unsustainable. I can kind of see where it's going. Like, but at least for now, for this next month, they have a place to live, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just important stuff to wrestle with. So there you go. If you enjoyed wrestling with that with us, we would appreciate it if you left a rating wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And if you are interested in learning more about investing with us, you can check us out at furlo.com. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.